Hi, this is a DrumWise Meets, and today I'm here with a drummer who's worked with the likes of Matt Berry. He's been a drummer for the Blues Brothers show, and he is the director and lead drum teacher at Music Station in Tonbridge. And for those people watching that don't know, James was my drum tutor at West Kent College back in like the early 2000s, 2001, 2002. And so I've known James for quite a long time, and I just thought it'd be really nice to do one of these interviews with him. This is DrumWise Meets James Sedge. Hi, James.
Hello, Tom. Good to see you.
So, my first question for you today, James. What age did you get into drums, and what bands or artists inspired you when you first started playing?
Well, I was probably a bit older than many of my students, actually. I started to listen to drums at the age of about 14. I became quite obsessed with listening. I didn't play. In fact, I didn't have any aspirations to play. Well, I was pretty obsessed with Neil Peart and Phil Collins. So I remember buying the Abacab album by Genesis. And I remember coming home on the bus with Moving Pictures on vinyl. I'd never heard a note of it. Put it on my turntable. Tom Sawyer blasted out, and I thought, oh, wow. It completely blew my mind. So over the next couple of years, I got really obsessed, and at the age of 18, finally bought a drum kit. And just very slowly picked it up.
And you mentioned your first drum kit, buying your first drum kit there. What was that kit?
Oh, well, it was a Premier Club. It wasn't a great kit. It had concert toms, which I would love to have back again now, because they're very hard to get hold of, concert toms. So I used that for about a year. And then, oops, I was really lucky. I saw an amazing drummer in Maidstone in a small jazz club. Called the Hazlitt Lounge. It wasn't even the theatre, it was the small lounge. And I had no idea about jazz or anything, but I thought I ought to go. And the drummer was a guy called John Christensen, who is possibly one of the greatest drummers who's ever lived. For the ECM label, worked with Keith Jarrett and those guys. And he had a Sonar kit. And I thought, oh, wow, I like this guy. So I bought a Sonar Performer, and I used that until about, the year 2000. I toured with it, I recorded with it. It was an amazing kit. So yeah, the Sonar Performer was my first proper kit.
Cool. And do you still have either of those kits, the Premier or the Sonar?
I sold it to a student. It was sitting there, and I just thought, oh, the student really needed the kit. So I sold it to him for a really good price. And as you do, a few years later, I thought, have you still got that kit? He said, no, I flogged it. So it's gone, but never mind. I do have quite a few drum kits now.
And that leads me nicely onto my next question then. So what equipment do you currently use? Obviously, you know, when you're out actually gigging, and you know, you can talk to us about your teaching setup too.
Sure. Okay. Well, as I'm sitting in my home studio, I use V drums for teaching because they're great. You know, it all goes into the box. There's no spill. The student gets to hear really good quality sounds, as you're obviously aware of. So the Rolands are good, and we have in my music school, Music Station, we have a room with 5 TD-17 kits, and the kids just love it. You know, they all play together, headphones, we feed the stuff through, all the backing music, and so the Roland kits are fantastic. But for my recording side, I've got a Ludwig 1968 vintage, and it's incredible. That bass drum, I did a little bit of research on it actually, like a sado, and found out that the Ludwig kits of the 60s had, they used wood that they'd bought from a warehouse, and the wood was already 100 years old. So the kits from the 60s, you know, they're 150 years old. And so that's, I think, part of the sound from the toms. Floor tom just sounds incredible. So I've got the 68 Ludwig. I've got a 68 Acrolite snare, which I just love. And I've got a Sona Century or Centenary snare, 76, which I think it's a bit of a Ludwig 400 kind of copy, but that's got a lot of sessions. And I just use random cymbals. People that insist on having all the same brand, I don't understand. If anyone's ever gone into a good recording studio with house gear, then you'll have a Gretsch bass drum and a Ludwig snare and a Sabian hi-hat, and it's whatever sounds good. So I've got many cymbals, but I do like the Istanbul range. But I use K's, and you know, all the brands are good, aren't they? You know, if anyone says they're not, then they must be crazy. You know, any of the major brands, when you buy the top end, they sound beautiful. So it's just a taste thing, really.
Yeah, certainly. And just because you mentioned Istanbul Agop there, for me, like when I switched over to those, you know, the amount of cymbal you get for your money with those, to me, is the drawing point of that, really, because they're just such. I think you mentioned those cymbals to me years back, and yeah, you know, I never listened to them or tried them, and then I was asked to try them, and I was just like blown away by how amazing they were.
Me too. I use one of the ride cymbals I particularly like is a Mel Lewis riveted ride, and it's on every recording I've done for the last 20 years. I've got loads of other rides, you know what it's like, and I put them up and think, no, I've got to go back. I've got to go back to that one.
Yeah.
And the stick just melts into it, and it's got all the articulation you want, but it feels nice to play as well. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of those cymbals.
Now, on to a question that some people have found really tough, but I'm not here to make your life easy, James. So if you had to pick just one, who would be your all-time favourite drummer?
Oh, God. Just one. Well, it depends on what week we're in, really, doesn't it? Or what year we're in, perhaps, as well, for me. I'll tell you what, let me give you... I knew you'd ask this, so I just thought, oh, God, I'm going to go blank. I made a note. Right. I've got a very quick top 10. Right.
Yep.
I'll start with Ringo. I really was drawn to put in Ringo at number one because of his creativity and how he invented perhaps the signature drum part for songs. You can hear, if you hear the groove of Tomorrow Never Knows or Come Together or Ticket to Ride, you know what the song is by what Ringo is playing. So it was so creative. If you think back, I mean, even I'm being quite old, I don't remember the 60s, but historically, I know what everyone else was doing at that time. And who was doing anything that was so creative? You know, drummers were keeping time, and they were really great drummers. But Ringo had something unique about his playing. And I always think of Ringo when I'm working with songwriters. What would Ringo do here? You know, I know his timing's a little bit wonky here and there, but I don't know, it feels good. And once you get past the technical thing, I know some drummers find that very difficult, but I think they should look again and stop thinking perhaps about pure technique. You know, if Buddy Rich was in the Beatles, it would have been a disaster. So, okay. Secondly, John Bonham. Power, groove, dynamics. But Bonham can't be the top for me because he only ever played with one band. That did happen to be a good band, but I don't get the versatility of working with different people. but Bonham is someone else who I'll never tire of.
Mm.
Jim Keltner, his work with virtually everybody, but particularly Ry Cooder, his kind of unconventional feel and creativity, massive fan. Bill Bruford, intelligence, creativity, polyrhythmic, sharp. I'm a massive Bruford fan. Right, I've got more. Tony Williams, that ride cymbal. On the 60s, Nefertiti, Miles Smiles, the ride cymbal. I still can't get over that. Perhaps I started with Neil Peart, his composition, the way that drum parts would be written and developed, and there was no improvisation really, but the way they were written, they was part of the song structure. So Neil Peart is always in my mind when I'm trying to come up with anything. You know, I don't want to play like him, but the thought process. Stuart Copeland, hi-hat, polyrhythms. Stuart Copeland's hi-hat playing still makes my head spin. Touch is unbelievable. Of course, Steve Gadd. What can you say? You know.
Yeah, you don't need to. Yeah.
You know, he was so untouchable and unknowable when I started out in the 80s and 90s. There was never. I'm sitting with Paul Simon at the arena, you know, and you couldn't dream of meeting him. And then in the last few years, Gadd is over at Ronnie Scott's Pizza Express. I've met him quite a few times, and he's such a sweet guy. He's so humble. I remember meeting him once where I said, I caught a gig earlier in the year, and Steve Gadd invited his manager over to shake my hand and say, this guy, he saw it, he's seen us twice this year. Oh, thanks, man. It's really, that's fine. That's fine. It was all my pleasure. Okay. But perhaps my number one, it has to be for me, Phil Collins. Now, much maligned because of his pop career. But if we go back to the 1970s, his work with Genesis particularly is awe-inspiring. The way he navigates odd time and complex structures. You never feel the bar line. You know, you don't always realise that the song is in 7 until you try to play it and think, well, hang on. Oh, we're in 7. And he flows around it. So his creativity with Genesis and his touch is fantastic. But he also worked with Brian Eno, Peter Gabriel. He invented that drum sound on Gabriel 3 for Intruder, the gated thing. Then, of course, there's that drum fill. That, you know, I've seen Phil Collins live a lot of times, and it was always a special moment. You know, some drummers get a little bit snooty about it. Like, it's just when you go to an arena and you see thousands of people excited by a drum fill, it's just magical. Yeah. So I think Phil Collins is the one. I kept thinking, you know, who could it be? But I listen to him more than anyone else. So I'll give you that one.
That's great. That's a good rundown. But the drum fill you're talking about, I thought that was played by a big hairy gorilla.
Yeah. Well, that was Phil in a suit.
Ah, right.
He wasn't a real gorilla.
Just because a lot of my students have been telling me when I tell them about that Phil and that Phil, they say, "Oh no, wasn't that a gorilla in a cabinet?"
I did a school assembly just before the lockdown, and we had about 400 kids, and I was showing them some drum things, and I had put the video of the gorilla playing. The excitement in the room, it was just fantastic. All those kids were just overexcited, and the thought of that gorilla doing that, I just so Phil will just have to live with the gorilla taking the all the
exactly. Now on to another one that people have found difficult, but I personally think that I already know the answer to this question for you, and that it'll be a really easy answer. So what's been the highlight of your career so far? And I mean, I'm happy to answer it for you if you want. Surely, just like meeting and teaching me.
Well, how did you know?
Well, I just thought I'd just guess.
I didn't.
You know.
I didn't want to embarrass you by saying it. You know, I've written it down here and crossed it out in crayon. But yeah, it was a life-changing moment when you turned up at the college, and I had to reevaluate a few things about myself. You know, my instant my instant fear of your amazing capabilities. No, it was great teaching you, Tom. Actually, I am very proud of what you've done. I wish I could take more credit. Anyway, I won't do that. Okay, career highlight. Couple of things then. Starting my own music school.
Music station.
We probably taught about 150,000 lessons in the last 7 years. So I'm quite proud of that. I'm writing. I actually wrote the Trinity, or the lead consultant for the Trinity Rock and Pop syllabus. So I'm very proud of that. That's gone worldwide. So I sometimes get updates from Trinity, and someone told me that loads of children in India are studying our syllabus, and you know, that's a big market in India.
Yeah.
they really like it. So that was 18 months of very, very hard work to try to come up with a new ethos for teaching based on authenticity and what it really is to be a player, and not the other syllabus is more about, I don't know, it feels more classically orientated, you know, and that's great, you know, but in my career that sort of playing hasn't really come up. So I teach to my strengths. And so Trinity were very brave in going with it. It made me very nervous because they spent a lot of money on the new syllabus, and I was thinking, oh, what if I've got this wrong? And what if everyone's going to hate me? But it's gone really well. So I'm very, very chuffed with that. And probably my favourite moment playing drums live was playing at the Albert Hall with Matt Berry when we supported Stephen Wilson. That felt like a real kind of moment, because I've been to the Albert Hall and seen many, many artists, and to be getting on that stage. Stephen Wilson and the band were so nice. Craig Blundell was so sweet, and Gavin Harrison was guesting that night. So during the sound check, I must admit, I polished my drums while they were sound checking for about an hour. My drums were very clean, but just to be on stage with a band of that caliber and just watching them work, for me, it's just a massive lesson, you know, watching the highest possible level of musicianship. So that was pretty cool. Doing the gig with Stephen Wilson and the band watching us from the wings was interesting. So this way we got 5,000 people, this way we got the world's greatest musicians. And I remember sitting down at the kit thinking, maybe I've made a terrible mistake. I shouldn't be here. And then I started thinking, strangely, as I sat down, I thought, oh, I wonder if John Bonham sat his kit here. Oh, I don't think that. Then, oh yeah, Ringo played here in '62. Don't think that. Oh, remember Hendrix, that gig Hendrix did. Don't think about it. So I had to give myself a stern talking to as I sat down. I remember Matt Berry said to me, actually, in the wings, he said, he was pacing around, and he said, are you okay? Are you nervous? And I said, no, not at all. I'm really looking forward to this. I lied. And he said, oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you're not nervous, because, you know, you'll keep everything together. I said, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. And, you know, my legs were just about giving way, you know. But little tip there. So when you're working with singers, always give them the confidence they need to be out the front. Because for us, it's terrifying, but I'm sitting at the back behind all these drums. So there's a kind of security here, but I wouldn't want to go out the front
No.
and face them. So, you know, never let the singer know that you're nervous.
Yeah.
Because they'll be more nervous, and then everything starts to unravel. So anyway, little tip there. So that was probably my proudest moment live so far.
Good stuff. Now, from career highlights to the other end of the scale, have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you've had to recover from? And by that, we're talking brain fails, gear fails, all of the above.
Oh, I did have one particular night on the Blues Brothers tour. We were playing at the Reading Hexagon, and we'd been on tour for about 6 months. And my drum kit was on a very, very big riser. In fact, I had to climb up a ladder to get, it was about 6 feet up. So I always thought in the beginning of the tour, I'm just going to sit here during this monologue bit where, you know, it's a West End show, so there's a lot of chat. And the rest of the band would all disappear, and I would just sit there quietly in the shadows. And it was a hot night in July. I thought, I'm going to get off tonight. I can't sit here and listen to 7 minutes of this again. So I got off, and everyone was backstage in the green room drinking coffee, and I thought, oh, what have I been doing? This is great. So I you know, I had a drink, then went to the loo, came back, and everyone had gone. And I thought, oh, I better go. And backstage at the theatre, if you haven't done a gig in the theatre, you've got speakers that you hear what's going on stage. And I could hear my cue coming up, and thought, I better get on. And I got lost, and I could not find the stage. And big stage curtains, I didn't realise they have lead at the bottom of these curtains. You can't pick them up. I was trying to crawl under in panic, and I could hear my cue coming up. And it was one of the singers would go, "You want to dance? Well, get off your butts and dance." And then I would count in Soul Man. And I could hear it coming up. And I was just running like a rat in a trap. And I could hear it coming. And just as he said it, I got to the side of the stage, the wrong side of the stage, by the keyboard player, as the spotlight went onto my empty drum stool. I didn't know I had a spotlight. I hadn't noticed. And that everyone was frozen on stage, waiting for the moment. And it was complete silence. And I just thought, well, I ran across the stage. You could hear my footsteps. And then I climbed up the ladder, sat down, picked up the sticks. By now my hands are like, and I counted the song off, and the band are laughing so hard the whole song was a disaster. And the stage manager I saw in the wings with the notebook, he was looking at me going, so I never got off stage again. I stayed very safely next to the kit with the sticks in hand so I could count the song in. So that was I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes thinking about that moment. So thanks for letting me relive that with you.
You know what? I've done a lot of these interviews now, and that is actually one of the best that anyone has said. That is brilliant.
Thank you very much.
And you know what? I've actually had a very similar thing happen to me.
Oh no.
And I may as well share it. So
come on then.
With the current band Purple Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven, anyone that knows that song, of course, the first, 4 minutes or so, no drums. So I do exactly what you do. I go backstage, I fill up my water bottle, go to the loo quickly, and then generally I stand in the side stage, waiting for my vocal cue when I know, and the forests will echo with laughter. Right, now I walk back on. And I was off, and I'm not going to point any fingers here, but the singer sang it wrong. And he missed a verse. And I was in the loo, and over, as you say, over the speakers backstage, I heard, and the forests echo with laughter, and I'm like, I'm not going to have a chance to wash my hands here, and I legged it back onto the stage. I legged it back to the stage, but it was a really long way. And I missed my cue, and they all just carried on playing the song with no drums because, of course, there should have been a whole other verse, and then I managed to just like get back on and like start it in an appropriate place. Yeah. Anyone that was there, you know, that knew that song really well, which would have been pretty much every single person, would have been like, "What is going on? This is an unusual."
Did you style it out as though that was always meant to happen?
I did, but then afterwards, everyone was like, what was that all about?"
And you can't blame the singer.
No, I did politely say, "I'm afraid, you know." I mean, I'm not scared to say this anymore because we don't have the same singer anymore, so it's fine. But
oh, that's good. That's good.
But you know, but then that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes there's a lesson there. Don't rely on anybody else. You know. Yeah.
One of my big lessons actually is the singer is always right. So in any circumstance on stage, the singer is always right. And if you always keep that in your head, no matter if they're wrong or not, because if you go with what they do, you'll be right. And if they make a mistake and you decide to do the right thing, then you make them look bad, you make you look bad, everybody looks bad. So, you know, I've been in a number of situations where, you know, I look over at the bass player and it's like, "Yep, let's just come in now." And the singer has missed a verse out. And, you know, mistakes happen. So you gotta look out for each other, haven't you?
Exactly. And I totally agree with you, you know, going with the singer. However, in that instance, it was very hard to go with the singer when I was in the middle of doing another one. So, you know,
I wish I'd seen that.
Anyway, so now on to a question about how you learn material. When you first get a gig with a new artist, or if you're doing a recording, or you're just learning new material, how do you learn the stuff? Do you just listen and just take it in and, "Oh, I've got it, great, boom"? Do you listen and transcribe? Or does anyone say, "Oh, James, here is the entire folder of the whole set written out in drum music. Just go away and learn that"?
That has only ever happened to me once with the Blues Brothers tour, and I had a month, so that was fine. Since then, that's never happened. So I do actually, depends on the material, you know, and maybe the profile of the gig, because if it's a big gig, there is more pressure, and if people know the material perhaps as well, then you have to be a little bit more, you know, on your game. So I do tend to transcribe note for note, and the strange thing is, I do it all in Sibelius, and I've never ever used it after I transcribed it. So the very act of sitting there transcribing means that I've memorized it. I have all the stuff with me in the rehearsal, not on the stage, and find that, I'll tell you what, actually, the big mistake I made a couple of years back is I did that. I transcribed the whole set and I started the rehearsal playing along with my own transcription. And it was very hard to then shut the book. I really shouldn't have done that. You know, I just didn't want to screw up. But I find get off the chart as soon as possible. I say it to all my students for their grade exams. The amount of kids that will play miss all the drums because they're looking at, and I actually say to them, "You're looking at it, but you're not seeing it. I know you're looking at it, but are you really reading it?" We can all do that. You know, you can just stare at a page of music. So what I try to do for everybody, whether they do an exam or not, is, you know, the book is there to help you learn. Then shut the book. And there will be the odd song where you think, you know, that arrangement, that's doing my head in. Okay, keep the book open for that one song. But just glance at it. You mustn't stare at it. So then I always try to get them to play to the audience, even if there is no audience. And not this, or not that. We all can do it. and I recognise that in myself sometimes. But of course, as soon as you come off the page, shoulders go back, you hit everything cleaner, it sounds sharper. And I say, imagine you've got a load of people there, look over their heads and play out towards the audience. And I don't think a lot of younger people realise the capacity we have for learning. I mean, your set with Purple Zeppelin, I mean, how many songs have you memorised?
The show is, without the interval, it's over 2 hours long, even without the interval. So
that's a lot of material.
Yeah, and obviously there's segues. So yeah, there's a lot of songs. Yeah, but in fairness, I do still have my notes. You know, I still have this iPad with my notes, but I don't read them. It's just a comfort blanket next to me, just in case. But yeah, I totally agree with what you say about not needing it, not relying on it.
I had a big lesson on the first night of that Blues Brothers West End tour thing, and we were playing at the Brighton Theatre Royal, and we'd done a month of rehearsals. It was a big show, you know, it was really good fun to do. And the MD went around in the sound check and just grabbed everyone's music and said, "You're not having that tonight." And I hadn't even contemplated the fact that the music wouldn't be there. And that show was very, very terrifying. But then, of course, I never needed it. You can't, it's not classical music. We're not playing with an orchestra, you know, memorize the tunes. So that's how I mainly learn. And if I'm doing a session, now everything's on my own now because of the lockdown. I tend to just do bar numbers now. It's strange. I've got a whole new method. So I'll just have intro, and then it will say, chorus starts bar 24. And I have the big count off thing on my screen in front of me. And as I, 19, 20, oh yeah, that's where I'm feeling the chorus. Yeah, okay. So I'm using a mixture of memory, mainly memory, but with the odd thing. So there's a songwriter I'm working with who does some weird, odd stuff, 2/4 bars. So, I'll have a note that will say bar 78, 2/4, 2/4, and it's great. Bar 70, I'm not counting bars. The machine is counting the bars. I hate counting bars. So that's a new method that's working really well for me at the moment.
What are your hobbies away from drums?
More drums, reading about drums, writing about drums, recording drums, polishing drums, watching YouTube videos of drums, and photography.
Of drums?
Mainly of drums. It's been a strange life I've led, and I've enjoyed most of it. So yeah, it's mainly, the thing is, if you really want to do something, I don't think there's a lot of time. Some people can do lots of things, and I'm very envious of them, that they can be of a good standard on all sorts of issues. But I just do the one thing a lot, and it's got me to a level where I can play and teach, where I'm not embarrassing myself, and I get some nice gigs here and there. And now I do all my own photography and shoot my own videos. And I'm writing a drum book at the moment. And this drum book is, it's about 10 years in the making. So I've just been going through my Sibelius files this week, and there are so many hundreds of them. So now the hard work really begins. You've written a book recently. It's really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, it took up a lot of time, but I was determined to get it done before my little girl was born, just because I knew that when she was here, two children, no time at all.
No chance.
And that, I like your answer there, because that's exactly the reason I wrote that question, because just because drums become our livelihood, for me, I obviously went to college where I met you as my drum tutor, And I did that because, okay, maybe I wanted to make drums my living or whatever. But right then, in the moment, I just wanted to do drums. It was my hobby and I loved it. And so it doesn't mean that drums can't still be our hobby, does it? So, you know, that's a great answer.
Yeah. So, oh, good.
And now for the most anticipated question of the entire interview series. This is the question. So, what's your favourite biscuit?
It's not a proper biscuit. Sorry. It has to be a Kitkat. It has biscuit in it, but it's covered in chocolate. I know you wouldn't dunk it necessarily. You could, but the Kitkat, yeah, sorry.
Okay, and then, well, the next part of that question is, yeah, normally would you dunk it? But you've obviously said that you wouldn't. But one of these interviews I did recently with Ben Thompson from Two Door Cinema Club, he, I don't know if you've seen it, but he mentioned the Kitkat Straw. And he challenged me to try the Kitkat Straw. And so you get a Kitkat, you have your cup of tea, you break one of the fingers off, and you use the Kitkat. No, you bite the ends off, the chocolate ends off the Kitkat, and then you suck the tea through the Kitkat like a straw. And you know what? Initially, it was quite nice, but then I think possibly my tea was too hot. So, of course, the entire thing started to fall to bits. So I think the trick with it is make sure your tea is lukewarm. And then it basically melts the inside wafer biscuit bit, and you're left with this Kitkat Straw.
Not to be done while you're teaching.
See, no, definitely not. No, absolutely not.
Conventional Kitkat eating, it can happen while I'm teaching. I can turn my mic off here and notice. Can't hear me. I can eat my Kitkat. The trouble with these mics is if you try eating anything secretly, it doesn't work. So we're kind of trapped in the online lesson thing. It's weird. I do miss walking around and picking my nose and things. And all the stuff that you'd normally do in a lesson, you're here.
All the things I remember you doing at college, yeah.
Yawning behind your back, you know. Well, you're struggling on something.
Exactly.
Watch, you know, thinking, oh, when's this over? No, it's very intense now, but in fact, many of the students have benefited from that intensity. It's tiring for us teachers because you really are on the whole time, but I've noticed some of the marks for the online exams are, you know, it's just incredible. We've had lots of in the 90s. I had a grade 8 student just before lockdown, though. He got 98%. I remember the examiner came out and said, I've knocked 2 marks off. I don't know why, but I didn't want to give him 100. So, but yeah, loads of kids are doing very well with the online thing. It's just us teachers that are exhausted and hung out.
Exactly. And my final question for you today, James, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, so when you first started learning the drums, what would that advice be?
I think it would have to be the groove thing. Learn to love the click. Make friends with the click. Too many people fight the click or don't want to use it. It's not going away now because everything's computerized, and I don't like quantize on musical instruments. I don't like it one bit. I find it sucks the life out and the individuality of the player, you know. And of course, once you quantize one bit, then the next bit has to be quantized. And I remember doing a song a while back where I think it just had a kind of beat, and the engineer said, "Oh, I might just quantize that. Yeah, pull it in a bit more." And he, you know, quantized it all, and it just sounded so terrible. And we just laughed and said, "Control Z.
Yeah,
let's go back. And if the odd snare is late or early, that's called feel. If you're good enough, hopefully, you know, where it doesn't sound bad." So I would say learn to groove. Don't look at Instagram chops too much, the gospel chops. Please don't, because if you played like that on virtually any gig in the world, you will be fired. I don't know why drums are an athletic pursuit, an Olympic sport. And I, stop working on polyrhythms and all sorts of stuff until you can play a straight groove. I remember I had a session with Max Roach once. It was a real privilege. There's a few of us there, and someone said, "What do you practice?" And he said, "Well, for the first few years, he just practiced quarter notes on the ride." I remember thinking, "What quarter notes?" Max Roach. And he played. This was in the festival hall in the daytime, so there's no one else there, and it was unamplified. And his ride cymbal filled the whole room, and the elasticity between every note, it just sounded the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. So I would say, work on that. Work on the groove, play to click. Don't use quantize unless you really have to. Learn to play it well within the click, and then you can move around with the click track. If you want to get into this chopsy stuff, fine afterwards. And there's always these outlier drummers, the Dennis Chambers, the Thomas Langs. But very quick story, Thomas Lang. I did a gig once where the singer said to me, I just joined the group, and she said, "Oh, I much prefer you to our last drummer." And I'm like, "Oh, that's nice of you to say." And I said, "Who was he?" He said, "Oh, this guy called Tommy." I said, "Oh, yeah. Tommy who? I might know him." She said, "Tommy Lang." This was back in the 90s. And I said, "What, Thomas Lang?" Yeah, he said he kept playing drum solos every 5 seconds, and I couldn't hear myself sing. I really didn't like playing with him. I much prefer you. So I can always say to people that I'm better than Thomas Lang, because I was just I was just playing, at that level. And she said Thomas would be playing, much heavier. I mean, the guy's a genius, obviously. I love watching him, but that was a lesson to me back in the 1990s about stop worrying about what he's doing, because he's got a career that is unique to him, and the guy is a genius. But I'm not that person. So if singer-songwriters are telling me to play less and play quieter, instead of arguing with them, younger drummers might say, "Well, I can't play quieter, it's a drum kit." Learn to play quiet, learn to play in time. You will have singers smiling at you all of the time. It's easier to play loud. I don't have to practice to play loud. I have to practice to play quietly. So that's my tuppence worth.
So James, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today, and also thank you for the knowledge that you have passed on to me over the years as my drum tutor. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's been a pleasure.